Bullies drowned her in the fountain daily. Then the human new kid held them under. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The central fountain of Meridian Academy had become a place of terror for Sarah, a place where water turned from life-giving substance to instrument of torment. For 93 days, the pattern repeated with cruel precision, and on this particular morning, as twin suns cast their pale light across the crystalline campus, she knew it would happen again. Sarah belonged to the Valine species, aquatic humanoids whose home world revolved around vast oceanic systems. Her skin held an iridescent quality, shifting between shades of blue and silver depending on her emotional state. Right now, it had taken on a sickly gray tone that betrayed her fear. The Valine were naturally fragile outside of water, their physiology designed for buoyancy and gentle aquatic movement rather than the harsh gravity and solid ground of terrestrial environments. At Meridian Academy, a prestigious institution that drew students from 47 different species across the Galactic Union, Sarah represented only the second Valine student ever admitted. She clutched her data pad against her chest as she walked across the main courtyard, trying to make herself as small and unnoticeable as possible. Her webbed fingers trembled slightly. The fountain loomed ahead, a massive circular structure of polished stone with water jets that created elaborate patterns throughout the day. It was meant to be a centerpiece of beauty, a gathering place where students from different worlds could appreciate the universal appeal of flowing water. For Sarah, it had become a nightmare. The three Kragath students were already there, lounging on the fountain's edge like predators waiting at a watering hole. Kragath were massive beings, standing nearly 3 meters tall with thick, armored skin that resembled gray rock. Their home world had gravity twice that of most standard environments, making them incredibly strong by comparison. Their culture valued dominance and power, and they had little patience for what they perceived as weakness. Brack was their leader, a mountain of muscle and casual cruelty. His small eyes fixed on Sarah the moment she entered the courtyard, and a grin spread across his broad face, revealing blunt teeth. Beside him sat Gorm and Thud, slightly smaller but equally intimidating, both already laughing at some shared joke that Sarah knew was about her. She tried to walk faster, to veer toward one of the side paths that would take her around the fountain rather than past it. But her legs, thin and designed for swimming rather than running, could not carry her quickly enough. Brack stood up, his massive frame casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the light. He said with mock friendliness, his voice a rumbling bass that carried across the courtyard. "Hey there, fish girl. Where do you think you're going?" Sarah's skin flickered rapidly between gray and pale blue, a physiological response she could not control. Several other students were nearby, members of various species, but they all suddenly became very interested in their data pads or found urgent reasons to be elsewhere. No one at Meridian Academy interfered with the Kragath. That was an unspoken rule, learned through painful experience by those who had tried. "Please," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. The Valine vocal structure was designed to work underwater, creating melodious sounds through specialized organs. In air, their voices came out thin and reedy, lacking the power to demand respect. "Just let me pass. I have class." "Oh, you have class," Brack repeated, mockingly mimicking her accent. His two companions moved to flank him, forming a wall of armored flesh between Sarah and her escape route. "That's funny, because we have a tradition here. Don't we, boys? Every morning, we make sure our little fish friend feels at home. It would be rude not to help her out." Thud grabbed her before she could react, his massive hand encircling her entire torso. The Valine were naturally slight, and Sarah weighed less than one of Brack's arms. She struggled, but it was like a butterfly fighting against a steel trap. "No, please," she gasped, her respiratory gills fluttering in panic. The Valine could breathe both air and water, but stress made the transition difficult. "Please, not again." Brack laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. He said as Thud carried her toward the fountain. "But you love water. We're doing you a favor." They had refined their torture over the past 93 days into something of an art form. It was not simply a matter of dunking her head under the water, though that would have been traumatic enough. Instead, they would hold her completely submerged for extended periods, keeping her down until her body's natural instincts forced her to switch from air breathing to water breathing, a process that was intensely painful when done suddenly. Then they would yank her out, forcing her respiratory system to switch back just as violently, back and forth, again and again, until she was coughing and choking, her skin turned almost white with shock, mucus and water streaming from her gills and mouth. The physical pain was terrible, but the psychological torture was worse. The Valine relationship with water was sacred, tied to their deepest cultural and spiritual beliefs. To have something so fundamental to her identity turned into an instrument of suffering created a wound that went far deeper than mere physical trauma. As Thud positioned her over the fountain, Sarah caught sight of other students watching from distant windows and walkways. Some looked uncomfortable, others simply curious. None moved to help. The Galactic Union preached values of cooperation and mutual respect, but here at Meridian Academy, as perhaps everywhere in the galaxy, power dynamics wrote their own rules. Brack placed his massive hand on the back of her head. He said, and then he pushed her under. The water engulfed her, and for a brief moment, there was almost relief. Water was her home, her natural element. But then her air-breathing lungs started to burn, and she knew what was coming. Her body began the forced transition, her gills opening painfully, drawing in water while her lungs tried to expel air. The sensation was like being torn apart from the inside. Just as the transition completed, they yanked her up. Air hit her open gills like acid. She gasped and choked, water pouring from her mouth and nasal passages. Before she could recover, before her respiratory system could fully switch back, they plunged her under again. The torture continued for several minutes that felt like hours. Sarah's vision began to blur, her body going into shock from the repeated trauma. She could hear their laughter even underwater, distorted but unmistakable. Finally, mercifully, they grew bored. Thud tossed her onto the ground beside the fountain like a piece of discarded trash. She lay there gasping, her body convulsing as it tried to stabilize. Water and other fluids pooled around her. Her data pad lay shattered a few feet away where it had fallen. "See you tomorrow, fish girl," Brack called out cheerfully as they walked away, their heavy footsteps making the ground tremble slightly. "Don't be late." Sarah remained on the ground for a long time after they left, too weak and traumatized to move. Other students passed by, giving her a wide berth, their faces carefully neutral. This was the 93rd time. 93 mornings of terror, 93 cycles of torture, and not once had anyone intervened. Not students, not teachers, not administrators. The Kragath were too powerful, too connected, their species too important to the Galactic Union's military structure for anyone to risk confronting them over something as insignificant as one Valine student's suffering. Eventually, Sarah managed to pull herself to her feet. She retrieved the broken pieces of her datapad and stumbled toward the medical center, where the automated systems would help stabilize her respiratory function. The medical staff never asked questions. They simply treated her injuries with efficient silence, their own reluctance to get involved hanging in the air like an unspoken accusation. After treatment, Sarah went to her dormitory rather than class. She had missed first period anyway. In the privacy of her small room, she allowed herself to cry, though tears held little meaning for a species that lived in water. She thought about contacting her family, about requesting transfer to another academy, about simply giving up and returning home. But leaving would mean admitting defeat, would mean acknowledging that she did not belong here among the other species of the galaxy. The Valine had fought so hard for recognition, for the right to participate in the wider galactic community. She was supposed to be a pioneer, a proof that her people could thrive in the Union. If she left now, it would set her species back decades. So she stayed, and suffered, and counted down the days until graduation, which was still 2 full galactic cycles away. She did not know that everything was about to change. That evening, as Sarah forced herself to eat dinner in the communal cafeteria despite her lack of appetite, the announcement came through the Academy's communication system. A new student would be joining Meridian Academy, transferring in from a recently contacted world on the galactic rim. The species was called human, from a planet designated as Earth, and they were one of the newest members of the Galactic Union. There was some buzz about this. New species did not join the Union often, perhaps 1 or 2 per generation. Humanity had apparently achieved faster-than-light travel independently, which was rare enough, and had done so using methods that puzzled Galactic Union scientists. There was curiosity about what these humans would be like, what strange traits their evolutionary path might have produced. Sarah paid little attention to the announcement. She was too exhausted, physically and emotionally, to care about galactic politics or new species. She finished her meal in silence and returned to her room, where she spent the evening trying to repair her data pad with limited success. Tomorrow would be day 94, and she needed to prepare herself mentally for another round of torment at the fountain. She did not sleep well. The Valine needed water to truly rest, and her small room had only a narrow sleeping pool that was never quite deep enough. She floated in the shallow water, her mind replaying the day's trauma on endless repeat, dreading the dawn. When morning came, Sarah seriously considered staying in her room, claiming illness to avoid the fountain. But she had done that twice before, and both times the Kragath had simply waited for her, extending the pattern an extra day as punishment for making them wait. It was better to get it over with. She dressed slowly in the Academy's standard uniform, a simple tunic and pants that accommodated the various body types of different species. Her hands shook as she gathered her belongings. The broken data pad barely functioned, but it was all she had. She would need to request a replacement from the Academy administration, which meant filling out forms and explaining what had happened to the old one, which meant lying because telling the truth would accomplish nothing except possibly making her situation worse. The walk to the main courtyard felt like a condemned prisoner's march to execution. Other students passed her in the corridors, chattering excitedly about their classes, their research projects, their social plans. Sarah moved through them like a ghost, separate from their world. As she approached the courtyard entrance, she could already see the fountain ahead, water dancing in the morning light. And there, right on schedule, were the 3 Kragath. Brack noticed her immediately and waved with mock enthusiasm. Day 94 was about to begin. But something was different this time. As Sarah entered the courtyard, trying to find some impossible route that might let her avoid the fountain, she noticed a figure she did not recognize standing near one of the side benches. The being was tall but not massive, perhaps 2 meters in height, with a build that was neither bulky like the Kragath nor slight like her own species. The creature had smooth skin with a pinkish tin coloration, hair the color of dried earth on its head, and wore the standard Academy uniform. The most striking feature was the eyes. Most species had eyes optimized for specific types of environments, but these eyes seemed remarkably similar to many species' vision organs, set forward in the skull in a way that suggested predator evolution. They were focused intently on the fountain scene developing before them. This had to be the new student, the human. Sarah had no time to wonder about the newcomer because Thud was already moving toward her. She tried to back away, but Gorm had circled around behind her. The trap closed with practiced efficiency. "Morning, fish girl," Brack rumbled, heaving his bulk off the fountain's edge. "Ready for your swim?" "Please," Sarah heard herself say again, the same useless plea she offered every morning. "Please, I have not done anything to you. Why do you keep doing this?" Brack seemed to consider this question with exaggerated thoughtfulness. He said finally, "Why? Because you're weak. Because you don't belong here. Because it's funny. Take your pick." Thud's hand closed around her torso, and Sarah felt the familiar grip of absolute helplessness. Her skin had gone completely white now, all color drained away by fear and resignation. She closed her eyes, trying to mentally prepare for the pain that was coming. Then a voice cut through the courtyard, clear and surprisingly loud for a being that was not particularly massive. The human had spoken, and everyone turned to look. "Hey, put her down." The words were simple, delivered in the galactic common tongue with an accent that suggested the speaker was still learning the language's nuances. But there was something in the tone, something that made even Brack pause. Thud maintained his grip on Sarah, but the 3 Kragath were now focused on this interruption. Brack took a step toward the human, his face showing more curiosity than concern. He said, "Excuse me?" The human walked forward with a measured pace that suggested neither fear nor aggression, simply purpose. Up close, Sarah could see more details. The being had a lean but solid build, visible muscles moving beneath the skin in a way that spoke of functional strength rather than bulk. The face was relatively flat with a prominent nose and those forward-facing eyes that tracked the Kragath with unwavering attention. "I said put her down," the human repeated. His voice was steady, calm even. "Whatever you think you're doing, stop it. Now." Gorm laughed, a sound like boulders tumbling down a mountainside. He said to Brack, "Is this thing serious?" Brack studied the human with the expression of someone trying to decide if something was a threat or just an annoyance. He said, his tone taking on the patient cadence of someone explaining things to a child. "I don't think you understand how things work here, new kid. What's your name?" "Nathan Brooks," the human replied. "Well, Nathan, here's a quick education. This," Brack gestured to Sarah, still held in Thud's grip, "is none of your business. We're just having some fun with our little fish friend here. It's a morning tradition. Nothing you need to worry about." Nathan's eyes moved from Brack to Sarah, taking in her white skin, her trembling form, the obvious terror in her expression. Something shifted in his face, a hardening around the eyes and jaw. He said quietly, "That's not fun. That's torture. Let her go." The courtyard had gone very quiet. Other students who had been passing through had stopped to watch this unprecedented scene. No one challenged the Kragath. No one interfered with their morning ritual. The idea was unthinkable. Brack's expression shifted from curiosity to annoyance. He said, "Or what? You're going to make me? Look around, human. Notice anything? Like how you're about a third of my size. Like how no one else here is stupid enough to get involved. There's a reason for that. We Kragath come from a high-gravity world. We're stronger than pretty much every species in the Union. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk away, mind your own business, and if you're smart, you'll learn to keep your mouth shut about things that don't concern you." Nathan stood very still for a moment, processing this. Then he said something that made Sarah's eyes widen in disbelief. "What's the gravity on your home world?" Brack blinked, confused by the question. He said, "What? Your planet. What's the gravity?" "In standard metrics." Gorm supplied the answer with obvious pride. 2.1 standard. Twice what most of you weaklings can handle." Nathan nodded slowly, as if this explained something. Then he said, and there was something in his voice now that had not been there before, something that made the hair on Sarah's neck stand up. "Earth's gravity is 0.98 standard. So basically standard. But here's the thing about humans that you're going to learn real fast. We didn't evolve in high gravity. We evolved as persistence hunters. Do you know what that means?" The Kragath exchanged glances, uncertain where this was going. Nathan continued, his voice still calm, but with an edge that was definitely present now. "It means our ancestors hunted by chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We're not the biggest, not the fastest, not the strongest. But we don't quit. Ever. We just keep coming until whatever we're after goes down. And here's another fun fact about humans. We're really, really good at violence when we choose to be. We spent thousands of years perfecting it against each other. So here's what's going to happen, Brack. You're going to let that girl go, you're going to apologize to her, and you're never going to touch her again. Or you and I are going to have a problem that I promise you don't want." The courtyard was dead silent. Sarah could hardly believe what she was hearing. This human, this new student who had been at the academy for less than a day, was threatening 3 Kragath. It was insane. It was suicide. Brack stared at Nathan for a long moment, then threw his head back and laughed, a booming sound that echoed off the courtyard walls. Gorm and Thud joined in, their combined laughter shaking the ground. Brack said between laughs, "Oh, that's rich. You humans are even dumber than the reports said. Okay, new kid, you want to play hero? Let's see how that works out for you." He gestured to Gorm, who cracked his knuckles with sounds like small explosions. The largest of the 3 Kragath moved toward Nathan with the confidence of someone who had never lost a physical confrontation in his life. Nathan did not move, did not flinch, did not show any sign of backing down. He simply watched Gorm approach with those predator eyes, his body relaxed but ready. What happened next would become legendary at Meridian Academy, discussed in hushed tones for years to come. Gorm reached out to grab Nathan, the same casual grip they used on students they wanted to intimidate. His massive hand could have enclosed Nathan's entire head, but the hand never connected. Nathan moved with a speed that shocked everyone watching. He was not Kragath strong, but he was fast, far faster than anyone expected. He sidestepped Gorm's grab, and in the same motion, his hand shot out and grabbed the Kragith's extended arm. Using the larger being's own momentum and some technique that no one quite understood, Nathan twisted and pulled. Gorm, who outweighed Nathan by at least 200 kilograms, went flying over the human's shoulder and crashed into the fountain with a tremendous splash. The courtyard erupted in gasps and shocked exclamations. Sarah felt her skin flush with sudden hope. Thud's grip on her loosened slightly as he stared in disbelief at his companion thrashing in the fountain. Brack's expression had gone from amused to dangerous. He said, his voice dropping to a threatening growl. "Big mistake, human." Both remaining Kragith rushed Nathan simultaneously. What followed was a brief but spectacular display of what humans called martial arts, though none of the watching students had any reference for what they were seeing. Nathan did not try to match the Kragith strength for strength. Instead, he used their mass against them, redirecting their attacks, targeting joints and pressure points that anatomy scans had apparently taught him about. When Thud swung a massive fist at his head, Nathan ducked under it and delivered a sharp strike to the Kragith's knee that made the larger being stumble. When Brack tried to grab him in a bear hug, Nathan slipped to the side and delivered a series of rapid strikes to the Kragith's ribs that made even his armored hide ring like a drum. The fight lasted perhaps 30 seconds, though it felt longer. It ended with Thud on the ground holding his knee, Brack backing away with newfound respect and wariness, and Gorm still trying to climb out of the fountain, his dignity more damaged than his body. Nathan stood in the center of the courtyard, breathing slightly harder but otherwise unharmed. He looked at each of the Kragith in turn and said in that same calm voice, "I told you to put her down." Sarah realized with a start that at some point during the fight, Thud had indeed released her. She stood on shaky legs, unable to process what had just happened. Brack helped Thud to his feet, his small eyes never leaving Nathan. The Kragith leader's expression was complex, showing anger, surprise, and something that might have been grudging respect. He said, "This isn't over, human." Nathan's response was simple. "Yes, it is. Touch her again. Touch any student like that again, and what just happened will seem gentle. I can keep this up all day, every day if I need to. That's what humans do. We don't quit. Ever. So the question is, can you?" For a long moment, the two beings stared at each other, engaging in some primal calculation of threat and determination. Then Brack did something unprecedented. He looked away first. He gestured to his companions and said, "Let's go." The three Kragith left the courtyard, Gorm dripping water and muttering curses, Thud limping slightly, and Brack maintaining as much dignity as he could manage. The gathered students parted for them like water around stones. As soon as they were gone, the courtyard exploded with conversation. Students clustered in groups, gesturing excitedly, replaying what they had just witnessed. Several looked at Nathan with newfound awe, others with concern about potential retaliation, still others simply confused about what had happened. Nathan ignored all of them. He walked directly to Sarah, who was still standing frozen in shock beside the fountain. He said gently, "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" Sarah's skin was flickering rapidly through a rainbow of colors, her emotional control completely shattered by the sudden reversal of her situation. She tried to speak, but found her voice had abandoned her. Instead, she simply stared at this impossible being who had done what no one else in 93 days had been willing to do. Nathan seemed to understand her inability to speak. He said, his tone patient and kind, "It's okay. You're safe now. They won't bother you again. I'm Nathan, by the way. I just transferred here." Sarah finally found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. She said, "Why? Why would you do that? You could have been seriously hurt. You don't even know me." Nathan smiled, an expression that transformed his face into something warm and genuine. He said simply, "Where I come from, you don't need to know someone to help them. You just do it because it's right. Nobody should be treated the way they were treating you. Nobody." In that moment, something fundamental shifted in Sarah's universe. For 93 days, she had been alone in her suffering, had believed that the galaxy was a cruel place where power was the only currency that mattered. But here was someone from a species she had never heard of until yesterday, who had risked himself without hesitation for a stranger of an entirely different species. Other students were beginning to approach now, some to check on Sarah, others to bombard Nathan with questions. But before the crowd could fully converge, Sarah managed to say, "Thank you. I don't know how to properly thank you, but thank you." Nathan's smile widened. He said, "You just did. Come on, let's get you to the medical center and make sure you're okay. Then maybe you can tell me where I'm supposed to go for something called advanced quantum mechanics. The campus map they gave me makes no sense." Despite everything, despite the trauma and fear and shock, Sarah found herself laughing. It came out as a strange burbling sound that was uniquely Valine, but it was genuine. She said, "I can help with that. I have that class too." As they walked together toward the medical center, surrounded by whispering students and navigating the sudden attention, Sarah felt something she had not felt in 93 days. Hope. She did not know that this was just the beginning, that Nathan Brooks would prove to be far more than a temporary savior. She did not know that the confrontation at the fountain would set in motion events that would challenge the power structures of Meridian Academy and reveal truths about humanity that would fascinate and sometimes terrify the wider galaxy. But in that moment, walking beside someone who had stood up for her when no one else would, Sarah allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. The day that had started with preparation for Torture 94 had transformed into something entirely different. As word of the fight spread through the Academy's communication networks, as students whispered in corridors and common rooms about the human who had faced down 3 Kragath, as teachers and administrators received reports of the incident and began their own discussions about how to respond, a single truth became clear to everyone. Something had changed at Meridian Academy. The rules that had governed social interactions and power dynamics had been challenged by someone who came from a world on the galactic rim, someone whose species was barely known to the wider Union, someone who apparently operated by principles that did not bend to the conventional wisdom of might making right. In the medical center, as automated systems checked Sarah's vital signs and helped stabilize her still traumatized respiratory system, Nathan sat in the waiting area with infinite patience. When she emerged, he stood up immediately and said, "All good." Sarah nodded, her skin now a healthier blue shade with hints of silver. She said, "Yes, thank you. Again, I feel like I'm going to be saying that a lot." Nathan laughed. He said, "Don't worry about it." So, about that quantum mechanics class. They walked together to the academic building, Sarah explaining the campus layout and Nathan listening attentively. Other students they passed stared openly, some with admiration, others with concern. News traveled fast in a closed community like an academy, and by now, everyone had heard about the fountain incident in one form or another. As they entered the classroom for advanced quantum mechanics, the professor, an elderly Talnari with crystalline skin that refracted light into rainbow patterns, looked up from his lecture notes. His multifaceted eyes settled on Nathan with obvious interest. He said, "Ah, you must be our new human student. Nathan Brooks, correct? I am Professor Velan. Welcome to Meridian Academy. I trust you are finding your first day educational." There was a definite emphasis on the last word that suggested the professor had already heard about the morning's events. Nathan simply smiled and said, "Very educational, Professor. Thank you. Please, take a seat," Professor Velan said, gesturing to the terraced seating area where students sat according to their species' physical needs. Some seats were designed for aquatic species with integrated water systems, others for heavy world species with reinforced structures, still others for species that preferred hanging from overhead structures. Nathan chose a seat in the standard section, designed for species with humanoid body plans and baseline environmental needs. Sarah settled into a seat beside him, ignoring the surprised looks from other students who were used to her sitting alone in the aquatic section. The lecture began, focusing on the mathematical frameworks underlying faster-than-light travel. Professor Velan was renowned in the galaxy for his work on quantum field theory, and his lectures were dense with complex equations and theoretical models. Nathan pulled out a data pad, a standard model the Academy had provided all students, and began taking notes. Sarah noticed that his note-taking style was meticulous, capturing not just the equations, but adding his own annotations and questions in the margins. When Professor Velan mentioned a particular aspect of quantum entanglement, Nathan's hand shot up. "Yes, Nathan," the professor said. "Sir, If I'm understanding correctly, you're saying that the Talon drive works by creating localized quantum tunnels that exploit naturally occurring entanglement between points in spacetime. But Earth scientists have theorized something similar, except we think the entanglement isn't naturally occurring, but rather artificially induced through harmonic resonance patterns. Has anyone in the Union explored that approach? The classroom went very quiet. It was unusual for a first-day student to ask such a detailed question, especially one that challenged a fundamental assumption about established technology. Professor Veland's crystalline skin seemed to brighten slightly, a sign of interest in Talnari body language. He said, "That is a fascinating question, Nathan. The honest answer is that most Union scientists have assumed natural entanglement, because our initial discovery of faster-than-light travel occurred when we stumbled upon a natural quantum tunnel near our home system. We have been refining that original discovery rather than exploring alternative theoretical foundations." You suggest that human scientists have independently theorized artificial entanglement induction? Yes, sir. Several research teams on Earth have published papers on what we call resonance bridge theory. I can share the translated versions if you're interested. I would be very interested indeed, Professor Veland said, and there was genuine excitement in his voice. This is exactly why we value diversity of perspective in the Galactic Union. Different evolutionary paths lead to different ways of thinking about problems. Please, send me those papers after class. The lecture continued, but Nathan had made an impression. Sarah could see other students looking at him with new respect, not just for the morning's physical confrontation, but for his intellectual engagement. In the Union, intelligence was valued as highly as strength in most contexts. After class, as students filed out, Professor Veland called Nathan over for a brief conversation. Sarah waited nearby, not wanting to intrude but curious about what the professor wanted. "Nathan," Professor Veland said quietly, his voice taking on a more serious tone, "I have already heard about this morning's incident at the fountain. While I cannot officially condone violence between students, I want you to know that what you did took considerable courage. The situation with those particular Kraggith students has been a concern for the faculty for some time, but institutional politics have made it difficult to address directly." Nathan frowned. He said, "With respect, Professor, institutional politics shouldn't prevent teachers from protecting students who are being tortured. What I saw this morning was not bullying. It was systematic abuse." "You are correct," Professor Veland acknowledged, and there was shame in his voice. "We have failed in our duty. I hope your presence here might serve as a catalyst for necessary change. However, I must also warn you that the Kraggith culture highly values honor and strength. This morning's defeat will not sit well with Brack and his associates. There may be retaliation. Let them try," Nathan said simply. "I meant what I said. I don't quit." "I believe you," the professor said. "But please be careful. Humans are still largely unknown to the wider galaxy. We do not fully understand your capabilities or your limitations. Do not take unnecessary risks." "I'll be careful," Nathan promised. "But I won't stand by and watch someone get hurt just because it's politically inconvenient to intervene." After leaving Professor Veland, Nathan and Sarah walked together toward the cafeteria for the midday meal. Along the way, several students approached Nathan with a mixture of gratitude and questions. There were more victims of Kraggith bullying than just Sarah, it turned out. The three who had tormented her also targeted other students they perceived as weak, though perhaps none as systematically as they had targeted the lone Valine. A small Pixan student, barely half a meter tall with chitinous plating and multiple limbs, scurried up to Nathan and spoke in rapid, high-pitched common tongue. "Human Nathan, I am Zillik. I wanted to thank you for what you did. The Kraggith have been taking my research materials and demanding I complete their assignments for them. I have been too afraid to refuse. But seeing what you did gives me hope that their control over us is not absolute." Nathan knelt down to be at eye level with the tiny being, a gesture that Sarah noticed immediately. It showed respect, a willingness to meet others on their level rather than forcing them to look up. He said, "Zillik, you should report them to the Academy administration. What they're doing isn't just bullying, it's academic fraud. That's got to be against the rules here." Zillik's multiple eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of distress. He said, "But they are Kraggith. The Academy needs their species' support for military programs. No one will listen to a complaint from a Pixan. Then I'll come with you to file the report," Nathan said firmly. Let them try to ignore both of us. You shouldn't have to deal with this alone. Zillick seemed stunned by this offer. He said, You would do this? But we only just met. And you are already at risk of Kragath retaliation. Why would you extend yourself further? Because it's right, Nathan said, that same simple response he had given Sarah. Nobody should be forced to do someone else's work because they're afraid of violence. That's not education, it's extortion. Word of Nathan's offer to help Zillick spread quickly. By the time they reached the cafeteria, Nathan found himself surrounded by a diverse group of students, each sharing stories of Kragath intimidation and asking if he could help them too. Sarah watched this with fascination. In less than half a day, Nathan had become a symbol of resistance against the Academy's unofficial power structure. But Sarah also noticed something else. While many students were drawn to Nathan's courage, others watched from a distance with hostile expressions. Not everyone at Meridian Academy appreciated someone challenging the established order. The Kragath had allies among the stronger species, those who benefited from a system where power determined privilege. In the cafeteria, Nathan approached the food dispensary with curiosity. The system was designed to provide nutritionally appropriate meals for dozens of different species, each with unique dietary requirements. Nathan studied the interface for a moment before selecting options that seemed closest to what Sarah guessed were human dietary needs, protein-based with carbohydrates and vegetable matter. They found a table in a relatively quiet corner, but within minutes, other students had joined them. Zillick climbed onto a chair modified for small species. A Morian student, a quadruped with elegant spiral horns and fur that shimmered with faint bioluminescence, settled nearby. Two Telkin, bipedal beings with scaled skin and elongated snouts, took seats across from Nathan, their reptilian eyes watching him with obvious interest. The Morian introduced herself. Her voice had a musical quality, like wind chimes in a breeze. I am Lissa. I wanted to properly thank you for what you did this morning. Sarah is my friend, though I am ashamed to say I have never had the courage to help her myself. Watching her suffer each day has been a burden on my conscience. Sarah's skin flushed with surprised warmth. She had not realized Lissa considered her a friend. The Morian had never spoken to her directly, though Sarah had noticed her watching the fountain incidents with obvious distress. Nathan swallowed a bite of his food before responding. He said, I'm glad to meet you, Lissa, but you don't need to thank me. Though I am curious, if it bothered you, why didn't you report it to the authorities? Lissa's bioluminescence dimmed, a sign of shame in Morian body language. She said, Because I was afraid. The Morian are not a confrontational species. We evolved as prey animals, and our instincts scream at us to avoid danger. Intellectually, I knew what was happening was wrong, but my body would not let me act. I feel great shame about this. One of the Telkin spoke up, his voice a dry rasp. He said, We all share that shame. I am Drexen, and this is my clutchmate Yelena. We too watch Sarah's suffering without action. The truth is that Meridian Academy has an unspoken hierarchy. The powerful species dominate, and the rest of us accommodate them to avoid becoming targets ourselves. It is an unjust system, but it has persisted because no one has been willing or able to challenge it. Until now, Yelena added, her eyes fixed on Nathan. You are human, a species we know almost nothing about. Yet in your first day here, you have disrupted social patterns that have existed for years. How is this possible? Are all humans so fearless? Nathan laughed, though there was no humor in it. He said, No, humans aren't fearless. I was scared this morning. Those Kragath are huge and powerful, and I knew I could get seriously hurt. But being afraid doesn't mean you don't act. It means you act despite the fear. That's what courage is. Doing the right thing even when it costs you something. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts before continuing. Look, I don't know much about galactic politics or union culture. I'm new to all of this. But where I come from, humans have a long history of fighting against bullies and oppressors. We've made a lot of mistakes along the way, done terrible things to each other and to our own world. But we've also learned something important. When you see injustice and do nothing, you become part of the problem. Silence is complicity. So when I saw what was happening to Sarah this morning, I couldn't just walk away. Not because I'm special or particularly brave, but because I'm human, and humans stand up for others. It's what we do. The table fell silent, each being processing this perspective. Finally, Zillick spoke in his high-pitched voice. Then perhaps we have much to learn from humanity. If such courage is standard for your species, humans may change the Union in ways we cannot yet imagine. I don't know about that, Nathan said modestly. I just know what my parents taught me, what my teachers on Earth emphasized. You protect those who can't protect themselves. You stand against bullies. You help others not because of what you might get in return, but because it's fundamentally who you should be. Sarah had been quiet during this exchange, simply listening and observing. Now she spoke, her voice stronger than it had been that morning. She said, "Nathan, what you did today gave me something I thought I had lost forever. Hope. For 93 days, I have endured torture at that fountain, and not once did anyone intervene. I had begun to believe that perhaps the Kragath were right, that I was weak and did not belong here. But you showed me that strength is not just about physical power. You reminded me that the galaxy should be better than it is." The others at the table murmured agreement. Lissa said, "Perhaps together we can make it better. Nathan has shown us that the existing order can be challenged. Maybe we should stop accepting injustice as inevitable." Drexen nodded slowly. He said, "The Telkin have a saying, 'One claw alone scratches poorly, but many claws together tear through stone.' We have all been alone in our resistance to the Academy's power structure. But if we unite, support each other, perhaps we can create real change." Nathan smiled. He said, "Now you're talking. Bullies rely on isolation, on making each victim think they're alone. Once people realize they're not alone, that they have allies, the bully's power crumbles pretty fast. So yeah, let's work together. Watch out for each other. Report abuse when we see it. And if necessary, physically intervene to protect those who need it." "But the Kragath are so strong," Zillick pointed out, his voice showing fear. "You were able to defeat them through skill and speed, but most of us do not have such capabilities. How can we resist being so much more powerful?" "Numbers," Nathan said simply. "And strategy. Look, I don't want to encourage violence. That should always be a last resort. But if it comes to it, 3 Kragath can't bully 20 united students from various species, each using their unique abilities in coordinated resistance. The Kragath are strong, but they're not invincible. They have weaknesses like anyone else. And more importantly, most of their power comes from fear and reputation. Take that away, and they're just big, angry students with poor impulse control." This brought laughter from the group, breaking some of the tension. As they continued to eat and talk, Sarah felt something shifting inside her. For so long, she had been a victim, isolated and powerless. But sitting here with Nathan and these other students, forming what felt like the beginning of genuine friendship and alliance, she felt that identity changing. She was not just a victim anymore. She could be something more. The rest of the day passed without major incident. Nathan attended his classes, consistently impressing teachers with thoughtful questions and unique perspectives shaped by human scientific and philosophical traditions. Sarah found herself serving as an unofficial guide, helping Nathan navigate the Academy's complex social and physical geography. As evening approached, Nathan asked about accommodations for physical exercise. He explained that humans had evolved with high stamina and needed regular physical activity to maintain optimal health. Sarah directed him to the Academy's Recreation Center, a massive facility with environments adapted for different species' exercise needs. At the Recreation Center, Nathan found equipment that would work for human exercise routines. As he began a workout that involved running on a velocity track and lifting resistance weights, other students stopped to watch. The sight of a human exercising was fascinating to many, revealing aspects of human physiology that were not immediately obvious. What became apparent very quickly was endurance. Nathan ran on the velocity track for a continuous period that exceeded what most species could manage. His body seemed designed for sustained activity, burning energy at a consistent rate that allowed for extended exertion. When he finally stopped running after nearly an hour, he was sweating profusely, water pouring from his skin in a cooling mechanism that some species found bizarre but effective, but he was not exhausted. He transitioned immediately to strength exercises, demonstrating a combination of endurance and power that defied easy categorization. A Horvan student, a massive being similar in size to Kragath but with a more philosophical temperament, approached Nathan after the workout. She said in a thoughtful voice. I have been observing your exercise routine with great interest. Human physiology is remarkable. You do not have the raw strength of high-gravity species, nor the speed of predator specialists, but your endurance is exceptional. I suspect humans are more dangerous in prolonged conflicts than in brief confrontations. This explains your earlier statement about persistence hunting. Nathan toweled off the sweat, a gesture that still looked alien to species that cooled themselves through different mechanisms. He said, You're right. Human military doctrine has always emphasized endurance over quick strikes. We fight wars of attrition, grinding down opponents through sheer refusal to quit. It's not always pretty, but it's effective. This worries me, the Horvan admitted. The Kragath value honor and strength, but they also respect efficiency. They fight until victory is clear, then stop. But humans, if your description is accurate, fight until complete victory regardless of cost. This is a frightening level of determination. It can be, Nathan acknowledged. Humans have a dark side. We've fought incredibly destructive wars against each other. But we've also learned to channel that determination toward positive goals. Protecting others, exploring the unknown, solving impossible problems. The same traits that make humans dangerous also make us valuable allies and friends. As Nathan and the Horvan talked, Sarah noticed a group of Kragath entering the recreation center. Not Brack and his friends, but other members of their species, likely drawn by reports of the morning's fight. They positioned themselves at various exercise stations, ostensibly going about their own workouts, but clearly watching Nathan closely. Nathan noticed them too. He said quietly to Sarah, who had been waiting nearby, Looks like we've got an audience. They're trying to assess me, figure out if this morning was luck or skill. What will you do? Sarah asked, suddenly anxious. There were at least 6 Kragath in the center now, all within easy reach if they decided to attack as a group. Nothing provocative, Nathan said calmly. I'm just going to finish my workout. But I'm not going to hide or act intimidated either. They need to understand that I'm not going away. He returned to his exercises, maintaining his routine with deliberate normalcy. The Kragath watched, occasionally commenting among themselves in their own language. The tension in the recreation center was palpable, with other students sensing potential conflict and either leaving or positioning themselves to watch safely. Then one of the Kragath approached. This one was older than Brack's group, with grayer skin that indicated maturity. He stood near Nathan's workout area and said in a rumbling voice that somehow conveyed respect rather than threat. Human, I am Krell, combat instructor for Kragath students. I heard about this morning. Impressive technique. Your species has formal martial systems? Nathan paused his exercises and turned to face Krell. He said, Yes, humans have developed hundreds of different fighting systems over thousands of years. Everything from grappling to striking to weapons-based combat. What I used this morning was a mix of several systems adapted for opponents larger and stronger than me. Krell nodded slowly. He said, The younger Kragath have become arrogant, believing their physical advantages make them invincible. You taught them an important lesson. Strength without skill is incomplete. I respect what you did, but I must ask, why did you intervene? The Valine is not of your species. You had no obligation. Because she needed help, Nathan said simply. And because watching someone get tortured and doing nothing would make me less than what a human should be. We have a concept on Earth called humanity, which is ironic since it's our species name, but it means treating others with compassion and dignity regardless of whether they're like us or not. I was trying to be humane. An interesting philosophy, Krell said. Not universal in the galaxy, I assure you. Most species help their own first, others only when advantageous. Your willingness to risk yourself for an unknown alien speaks well of human character. But be warned, human Nathan. Brack and his friends will seek revenge. It is their nature. They will not attack directly, not after this morning's humiliation. But they will scheme, plot, find ways to hurt you or those you care about while maintaining plausible deniability. Let them try, Nathan said. I've dealt with bullies before. They're usually cowards at heart. They hurt others because it makes them feel powerful, but when someone stands up to them consistently, they eventually back down or make a mistake that exposes them. You are confident, Krell observed. I hope for your sake that confidence is justified. But if you need training partners to maintain your combat skills, You may join the Kragath martial practice sessions. Some of my people are arrogant, but not all. Some would value the opportunity to learn from human fighting techniques. I'd like that, Nathan said, clearly pleased by the offer. Thank you. Krell nodded and returned to his own exercises. The other Kragath in the center seemed to relax slightly, taking their instructor's interaction with Nathan as a signal that open hostility was not appropriate. The tension decreased, though the watchfulness remained. Later that evening, Nathan and Sarah sat together in one of the Academy's observation lounges, a space with massive transparent walls offering views of the alien sky. The campus of Meridian Academy was located on a neutral world specifically chosen for its moderate environment suitable to most species, and its sky showed unfamiliar constellations that neither of their home worlds could see. Sarah had been mostly quiet since leaving the recreation center, processing the day's extraordinary events. Finally, she said, "Nathan, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. You keep saying that what you did was normal, that any human would have acted the same way. But is that really true? Earth must have bullies too, people who hurt others and those who stand by and let it happen. Not everyone can be a hero." Nathan was quiet for a moment, looking out at the alien stars. Then he said, "You're right. Earth has plenty of bullies and plenty of people who look the other way. Humans aren't perfect. We've done terrible things throughout our history. Slavery, genocide, endless wars over resources and ideology. We've hurt each other in ways that shame our species. Then how are you different?" Sarah asked. "What makes you stand up when so many others would not?" Nathan thought about this carefully before responding. He said, "My parents, I guess. They raised me with strong values about right and wrong. My dad was a teacher who always said that evil triumphs when good people do nothing. My mom was a doctor who treated everyone the same regardless of who they were. They taught me that you judge yourself not by what you say, but by what you do when it matters. So when I saw what was happening to you this morning, I had to ask myself, what kind of person do I want to be? Someone who walks away and lives with that regret, or someone who acts and accepts the consequences? And you chose to act. I chose to be someone I can respect when I look in the mirror. That's all. I'm not a hero, Sarah. I'm just a guy who doesn't want to be a coward." Sarah's skin shifted to a warm turquoise shade, an indication of deep emotional connection in Valine physiology. She said, "On my world, we have a concept called Nalari, which roughly translates as soul bond. It refers to people who enter your life and fundamentally change it for the better, who see you when you are invisible to others and help you become more than you thought possible. In just one day, Nathan Brooks, you have become Nalari to me. This is a sacred relationship among my people. It means I will stand with you as you stood with me, no matter what comes." Nathan seemed touched by this. He said, "I'm honored, Sarah. Truly. And I hope we're going to be great friends. But you don't owe me anything. What I did this morning wasn't a debt you need to repay. It is not about debt," Sarah explained. "It is about recognition. You saw me when I had become invisible to others. You treated me with dignity when I had been stripped of it. This is Nalari. It transcends obligation and enters the realm of chosen family. Among the Valine, this is one of our most important relationships." "Then I'm grateful to be Nalari with you," Nathan said warmly. "On Earth, we'd probably call it best friends, and we take that pretty seriously too." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, watching the alien stars whirl slowly across the sky. Finally, Sarah said, "What do you think will happen tomorrow? Will Brack and his friends try to attack you?" "Maybe," Nathan said. "Probably not directly, if what Krell said is accurate. They'll try something indirect. We'll have to stay alert." "I will help you," Sarah said firmly. "And so will the others. Zillik, Lissa, Drexen, and Yelena. We will watch for threats and warn you." "That's good," Nathan said. "Because honestly, I'm not sure I can handle 3 Kragath at once if they actually plan their attack instead of just rushing in angry. This morning worked because I caught them by surprise and used their momentum against them. But if they're smart about it next time, things could go differently. Then we will ensure they do not get that opportunity," Sarah said. The next morning, Sarah woke early with a mix of anticipation and dread. For the first time in 94 days, she did not wake up dreading the fountain. But she also knew that Brack would not simply accept yesterday's defeat. Something was going to happen, and the waiting for it felt almost worse than the certainty of daily torture had been. She met Nathan for breakfast in the cafeteria. He looked alert and rested, apparently having slept well despite the potential threats hanging over him. He greeted her with a warm smile and said, "Ready for day 2? "As ready as I can be," Sarah replied. "How do you feel?" "Good. I went through some of my martial arts forms this morning, made sure my body remembers the techniques. Muscle memory is important. If something happens, I don't want to have to think, just react." They were joined quickly by their new circle of friends. Zillik climbed onto the table, his chitinous plating reflecting the cafeteria lights. Lyssa settled beside them, her bioluminescent fur pulsing gently. Drexen and Yelena arrived together, as clutchmates usually did. Even the Horvin from the recreation center, who introduced herself as Dinah, came by to check on Nathan. "Word has spread through the entire academy," Dinah reported in her thoughtful voice. "The incident at the fountain is the primary topic of conversation. There are 2 main factions forming, those who support your actions and those who view you as a disruptive threat to established order. The administration has called an emergency assembly for all students at midday." "An assembly?" Nathan asked. "About what happened?" "Officially, it is about reviewing academy policies regarding student conduct," Dinah said. "Unofficially, everyone knows it is about you and the Kragath. The administration has been forced to acknowledge a situation they have long ignored. This is unprecedented." As they talked, Sarah noticed a group of students at a distant table staring at them with obvious hostility. They were a mix of species, including several Kragath, some Narthian, a massive species known for aggressive territorial behaviors, and even a few others. It seemed Brack had been building alliances overnight. Lyssa followed Sarah's gaze and said quietly, "The Narthian are usually allies of the Kragath. Both species value strength and domination. If they unite against Nathan, the situation becomes more dangerous." Nathan noticed the hostile stares but seemed unconcerned. He said, "Let them stare. They can't actually do anything in here with this many witnesses. And the more they isolate themselves as the pro-bullying faction, the clearer it becomes what this conflict is really about." After breakfast, they attended morning classes. Sarah had worried that Nathan might become a distraction, that other students would be so focused on yesterday's events that learning would become impossible. But Nathan himself set a different tone. In each class, he engaged seriously with the material, asked thoughtful questions, and demonstrated genuine intellectual curiosity that commanded respect beyond his physical confrontation with the Kragath. In xenobiology class, Professor Marta, a Lumina whose entire body glowed with soft bioluminescence, discussed the various reproductive strategies found across Union species. When she mentioned that humans were unusual in giving birth to highly underdeveloped young who required years of intensive care before reaching independence, Nathan raised his hand. "Professor, that's true. Human infants are helpless for longer than almost any other species on Earth. There's a theory that this is because humans evolved such large brains that we had to be born earlier before our heads got too big for the birth canal. But this extended childhood period also allowed for more complex social learning and cultural transmission. We think it's one of the key factors that enabled human civilization to develop so rapidly." "Fascinating," Professor Martis said, her glow brightening with interest. "And this extended vulnerability of offspring, did it influence human social structures?" "Absolutely," Nathan replied. "Humans evolved as social creatures partly out of necessity. A lone human with an infant has very poor survival odds. So we developed complex family structures, tribes, communities. We became very good at cooperation because we literally couldn't survive alone. That's still true today, even with all our technology. Humans are intensely social. Yet you are comfortable being alone at this academy," Professor Marta observed. "Far from your home world, surrounded by aliens. Most humans I have read about in the preliminary reports seemed quite uncomfortable with isolation." "I'm not alone, though," Nathan said, gesturing to Sarah and their other friends sitting nearby. "I've made friends. That's what humans do. We find people we care about and build communities. The fact that my friends here are different species doesn't really matter. The social instinct is the same." This sparked a lengthy discussion about social bonds across species boundaries, with several students sharing their own experiences and perspectives. By the end of class, What could have been an awkward situation dominated by gossip about yesterday's fight had instead become a genuinely educational dialogue about comparative social biology. As students filed out, Professor Marta called Nathan aside. She said quietly, "That was well handled. You redirected attention from conflict to learning. A valuable skill. But I must echo what others have likely told you. Be careful. The social bonds you are forming are genuine and commendable, but they also paint a target on you and your friends. The Kragath faction will seek to break those bonds, to isolate you again." "I understand," Nathan said, "but I'm not going to avoid making friends because it might be strategically safer to be alone. That would defeat the whole purpose of standing up to bullies in the first place." "Noble," Professor Marta said. "I hope your nobility does not lead to tragedy. Now go. The assembly will begin soon." The entire student body of Meridian Academy, nearly 2,000 beings representing 47 different species, gathered in the grand amphitheater. The structure was an architectural marvel, with seating arranged in ways that accommodated wildly different body types and environmental needs. Aquatic species had sealed pods with water environments. Methane breathers had isolated sections with appropriate atmosphere. Species that preferred darkness had shaded areas, while those needing intense light had focused illumination. Nathan and his friends found seats in the standard environment section, a location that offered good visibility of the central platform where Academy administrators would speak. Sarah noticed that other students seemed to be consciously choosing positions either near Nathan's group or deliberately far away, the physical seating arrangement reflecting the ideological divide developing in the Academy. Dean Thoric, a Valdorian with multiple stalked eyes and a body that resembled a massive slug with manipulator tentacles, oozed onto the central platform. The Valdorian were known for exceptional diplomatic skills and careful political maneuvering. Dean Thoric's multiple eyes swiveled to take in the entire gathered student body before he began speaking in the slow, measured cadence typical of his species. "Students of Meridian Academy, we gather today to address recent events that have caused considerable disruption to our community. As many of you know, yesterday morning there was a physical altercation involving several students near the central fountain." Sarah noticed he did not mention names or species, keeping the language deliberately vague. Dean Thoric continued, "This academy was founded on principles of mutual respect, intellectual growth, and peaceful coexistence among the diverse species of the Galactic Union. Violence between students contradicts these core principles. Therefore, the administration has reviewed our policies regarding student conduct and conflict resolution." "Here it comes," Drexen whispered. "They will announce new policies that sound meaningful but change nothing fundamental." Dean Thoric's tentacles gestured in complex patterns as he spoke. "Several new policies are being implemented immediately. First, any student who engages in unprovoked physical assault against another student will face immediate suspension pending investigation. Second, we are establishing a formal reporting system for student complaints regarding harassment or intimidation, with guaranteed protection against retaliation for those who file reports. Third, we are implementing mandatory conflict resolution training for all students, with particular focus on species that come from cultures where physical dominance is normalized." The amphitheater erupted in murmurs and exclamations. These were not minor policy adjustments. If actually enforced, they would fundamentally alter the power dynamics at the Academy. Nathan leaned over to Sarah and whispered, "This is better than I expected, but the key is enforcement. Policies don't mean anything if administrators don't have the will to apply them." As if hearing Nathan's concern, Dean Thoric raised a tentacle for silence and continued, "I am aware that some of these policies have existed in theory but have not been consistently enforced. This represents a failure of administration, myself included, to adequately protect all students. This changes now. I am appointing a new Student Safety Council, composed of students from various species, who will have direct authority to investigate complaints and recommend disciplinary actions. This council will report directly to me and will have my full support in addressing issues that have been allowed to persist for too long." Now there were gasps throughout the amphitheater. Student councils with actual power were rare in union institutions. This represented a significant devolution of authority from administration to students themselves. However, Dean Thorick said, his tone becoming more grave, I must also address the matter of the specific incident that triggered these policy changes. While I understand that the human student involved was acting to defend a fellow student from what he perceived as assault, the use of violence remains problematic. Nathan Brooks, please stand. Nathan stood slowly, suddenly the focus of 2,000 sets of eyes. Sarah felt her skin pale with worry. Was the administration going to punish Nathan despite the policy changes? Dean Thorick's multiple eyes focused on Nathan. Nathan Brooks of Earth, you have been at this academy for less than 2 standard cycles, yet your actions have already significantly impacted our community. Your intervention on behalf of student Sarah, while well-intentioned, involved techniques and force levels that could have resulted in serious injury. Do you understand the potential consequences of your actions? Nathan's voice carried clearly through the amphitheater as he replied, Yes, Dean Thorick. I understand that I could have hurt those students. But I also understood that Sarah was being actively tortured and that no one else was helping her. I made a choice to act, and I would make the same choice again under the same circumstances. A bold answer, Dean Thorick said, and an honest one. After reviewing testimony from multiple witnesses, including several faculty members who observed the incident from nearby buildings, the administration has determined that your actions, while technically in violation of our nonviolence policies, were undertaken in defense of another student who was in genuine danger. Therefore, no disciplinary action will be taken against you. Relief flooded through Sarah so intensely that her skin flashed bright silver. Around the amphitheater, there were mixed reactions, cheers from some sections, angry muttering from others. However, Dean Thorick continued, his tentacles making calming gestures. We must also acknowledge the events that preceded the incident. Multiple witnesses have now come forward to report that student Sarah had been subjected to repeated assault and harassment for an extended period, actions that clearly violated academy policies but were never formally reported to administration. Students Brack, Gorm, and Thud, please stand. In a distant section of the amphitheater, the 3 Kragath stood reluctantly. Even from this distance, Sarah could see the anger in their postures. Dean Thorick addressed them directly. After investigation, the administration has concluded that you 3 engaged in systematic harassment and assault against student Sarah for approximately 93 standard days. This behavior is completely unacceptable and represents gross violations of Academy conduct policies. You are hereby suspended from Meridian Academy for 1 full galactic cycle. During this suspension, you will undergo mandatory counseling regarding appropriate social behavior and conflict resolution. Your return to this academy will be contingent on demonstration of genuine behavioral change. The amphitheater exploded with noise. This was unprecedented. Suspending 3 Kragath students represented a major political risk for the academy, potentially damaging relationships with the Kragath military establishment that provided significant financial support to Union educational institutions. Brack's voice boomed out, easily heard over the general tumult. This is an outrage. We are Kragath. The human attacked us without provocation. Dean Thorick's voice somehow cut through the noise with calm authority. Student Brack, there were 17 witnesses to the incident, including 6 faculty members. All testimony confirms that you and your companions were in the process of assaulting student Sarah when Nathan intervened. Your claim of being attacked without provocation is demonstrably false. Security personnel will escort you to your quarters to collect your belongings. You have 4 standard hours to depart campus. Brack looked like he wanted to argue further, but Krell, the combat instructor who had spoken with Nathan yesterday, appeared beside the 3 younger Kragath and said something quietly to them. Whatever he said, it made them back down, though Brack's final look toward Nathan was filled with venomous promise of future revenge. As security escorted the 3 Kragath from the amphitheater, Dean Thorick concluded, "Let this serve as notice to all students. Bullying, harassment, and assault will no longer be tolerated at Meridian Academy regardless of the species involved or the political implications. We are here to learn, to grow, and to prepare ourselves to serve the Galactic Union with honor and competence. Behavior that contradicts those goals has no place in this institution." This assembly is concluded. As students filed out of the amphitheater, the atmosphere was electric with conversation. Some students approached Nathan to congratulate him, others to thank him for inadvertently triggering policy changes they had hoped for but never expected to see. Still others kept their distance, viewing him with suspicion or hostility. Zillick scurried up to Nathan, his multiple limbs allowing rapid movement. He said with obvious excitement in his high-pitched voice, "Human Nathan, this is remarkable. In one day, you have accomplished what seemed impossible." The Kragath faced consequences for their actions. Real consequences. "I never thought I would see this." "It wasn't just me," Nathan said, deflecting the praise. "Dystopian deserves credit for actually following through. And all the witnesses who finally came forward to testify, they're the ones who made this possible." Lissa's bioluminescence pulsed with warm colors as she said, "You are modest, Nathan. But Zillick is correct. Without your initial intervention, none of this would have happened. The witnesses came forward because you showed them that challenging the Kragath was possible. You broke the spell of fear that kept everyone silent." Denna, the thoughtful Horvin, joined the conversation. She said, "This is a significant victory, but we must not become complacent. Brack and his companions will be gone for one galactic cycle, but they have allies who remain. And when they return, they will likely be more dangerous, more cunning in their approach. This is not over." Nathan nodded seriously. "You're right. And honestly, part of me feels bad about getting them suspended. I mean, what they were doing was terrible, but they're also products of their culture. The Kragath value strength and dominance. They probably thought what they were doing was normal, maybe even helping Sarah by toughening her up or something equally messed up. That does not excuse their actions," Sarah said firmly. Her skin had taken on a determined blue shade. "I understand they come from a different cultural context, but this is Meridian Academy, not a Kragath military training facility. They had an obligation to adapt their behavior to an environment with different species and different values. They chose not to do so." "Fair point," Nathan acknowledged. "But I think there's a lesson here about how we integrate different species with very different evolutionary backgrounds and cultural norms. The Union can't just assume everyone will automatically get along. There needs to be better education about cultural differences and clear boundaries about what behaviors are acceptable. Perhaps you should propose that to the new Student Safety Council," Drexen suggested. "If the dean is serious about student input, this would be valuable feedback." Over the following days, life at Meridian Academy began to change in ways both obvious and subtle. The Student Safety Council was formed with surprising speed, including representatives from 12 different species. Nathan was invited to join but declined, saying that he was too new to the academy and did not yet understand all the complexities of the community. Instead, he recommended Sarah for the position, an endorsement that carried considerable weight given his role in triggering the reforms. Sarah accepted the position with both pride and trepidation. For someone who had been a victim of systematic abuse just days earlier, suddenly having authority to address such issues felt surreal. But she threw herself into the work with determination, bringing to the council her unique perspective on what it felt like to be vulnerable and ignored. The council's first major action was implementing the formal reporting system Dean Thorick had mentioned. They created multiple channels for students to report harassment or intimidation, including anonymous options for those too afraid to come forward openly. Within the first week, they received 43 reports, many describing patterns of abuse that had persisted for months or even years. Nathan continued attending his classes and quickly developed a reputation as one of the academy's top students. His human perspective brought fresh insights to nearly every subject, from quantum mechanics to exosociology. Professors began calling on him regularly, knowing he would likely have an interesting angle that others might not have considered. But Nathan's most significant contribution was perhaps the informal network of students that formed around him. Starting with Sarah, Zillick, Lissa, and the others, it grew to include dozens of students from various species who had previously felt marginalized or vulnerable. They began meeting regularly in one of the common areas, a gathering that became known as the Human Circle, though Nathan repeatedly tried to change the name to something less centered on himself. These meetings served multiple purposes. Students shared concerns about safety or harassment, which could then be brought to the Student Safety Council. They studied together, with stronger students helping those who struggled. They exchanged cultural knowledge, learning about each other's worlds and traditions. And perhaps most importantly, they formed genuine friendships that crossed species boundaries in ways that were still relatively rare in the Union. Nathan also began teaching martial arts to interested students. With approval from the Academy administration and oversight from Krell, the Kragath combat instructor who had become an unexpected ally, Nathan ran regular sessions where he taught basic self-defense techniques adapted for different body types and physiologies. These sessions were enormously popular, with students from over 20 species attending. Teaching a Pixin how to use leverage to escape a larger opponent's grip required creativity. Showing Illumina, whose body was partially energy-based, how to apply force effectively meant understanding physics in new ways. Working with species that had different numbers of limbs or radically different centers of gravity pushed Nathan to think beyond human-centric combat. But the results were remarkable. Students who had once walked the corridors in fear now moved with confidence. 6 months later, Sarah stood beside the central fountain, no longer a place of terror but reclaimed as what it was meant to be, a place of beauty and gathering. The water danced in the sunlight while students from a dozen species sat along its edges, laughing and talking. Nathan sat among them, animatedly explaining some human concept that had everyone listening with fascination. The transformation of Meridian Academy was complete. Harassment reports had dropped by 80%. The Student Safety Council had become a model for other union institutions. And most importantly, the culture had shifted. Bullying was no longer tolerated or ignored. Students looked out for each other across species lines. When Brack, Gorm, and Thud returned after their suspension, they were different. The mandatory counseling had forced them to confront their behavior and its impact. Brack even approached Sarah privately one day and offered a formal Kragath apology, a ritual that involved considerable vulnerability in his culture. Sarah accepted it, not because she forgot what had happened, but because she believed in growth and second chances. Nathan graduated top of his class 2 years later, with Sarah right beside him. They both received offers from prestigious research institutions, but they chose to work together on a project studying cross-species cooperation and conflict resolution. Their paper, based on the Meridian Academy reforms, became required reading throughout the Union. On graduation day, as Nathan stood before the assembled students and faculty to deliver the valedictorian address, he looked out at the diverse faces, the multitude of species who had become his friends and colleagues. He said simply, echoing the words that had started everything, "Where I come from, you protect those who cannot protect themselves. You stand against bullies. You help others not because of what you might get in return, but because it is fundamentally who you should be. That is what it means to be human. And I believe that is what it should mean to be a member of the Galactic Union." The fountain continued to flow, its waters now carrying only peace and the promise that when good people act, they can change the world. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.